Mastering the minis, number 7. Number 6 was a regular spool block with a solid center. Number 7, let's experiment with putting in some thread lines here. So we're going to start by using 7/8 inch strips of fabric. We're going to sew those together. So I'm going to start by doing 2 and 2 and then putting the 4 together. I want that 4 to measure at 2 1/4 inches. So the very first block I'll do, I'll make sure that measures out. Always start with a scant seam allowance. I'm using that scant seam allowance to make sure that I have plenty of give in my, I don't want to rip. Much rather sew than rip. Remember, always make a test block. I have found with mastering these minis that the accuracy of how large your quilts or your quilt blocks are is key. So measure every time you are going along. And give yourself grace because sometimes your 1/4 inch changes. Even if you've been sewing in the same sewing machine for an hour, it can change. So I have my strips now. 7/8 is about as tiny as I can make in this machine without having to worry about my presser foot. So when I'm going to put these small strips together, I finger press my seams to the outside so they won't get caught up underneath my presser foot. You could also use your iron to press those down because they will play with your seam allowance. All right, now I'm going to measure this and press it just to make sure that I have the right seam allowance. So I'm 2 1/4 perfectly. I'm going to press this and we'll cut. I like to have all my seams going in the same direction, and so 2 of them are already going this direction, and this is a light fabric anyway, so we're going to move that guy over here and press away. I'm going to have enough to make at least a couple of spools here, so I'm going to go ahead and cut a couple of 2 1/2 inches, or sorry, 2 1/4 inches. First, cut my selvage off. Give me a nice, clean edge. I like to line up using that vertical line or a vertical line within my quilt and the 2 1/4 inch so that I've got a line up between the horizontal and the vertical. I've got 2 here so I can make 2 blocks, and then I'm going to pull out my other stuff. So next thing I want to do is I want to make the top and the bottom of my spool. So I am going to use my squares to make the top and the bottom into triangles. So first thing I do is make a diagonal using my heat erase pen on each square. When I place it on the top and bottom of my spool, I want to make sure that the diagonals are pointing in towards each other so that I'm going to have a narrow end and a wide end. And then I'm going to stitch on the outside of the line so that when I turn this over, it's covering my stitching line. Let's go to the sewing machine. So I've moved the needle back to the center of my presser foot so that I can follow that line more closely. And I'm going to be just to the right of my line so that I can make sure that I'm covering my stitching line. Then we'll do the second one, we'll press them and get ready for the next step. So now I'm going to stitch the lines to the side of the spool, changing my seam allowance back to what I know it should be. If I had more of these, I could chain piece them easily. No seams to line up, just edges. Okay, we're gonna go and put this with the rest of the spool. So just to make sure, I am gonna measure just to make sure we're on the 4-inch, so we're good. And then I am going to iron this, and I usually do my inner blocks where they're going inside, but I have so much fabric here that I'm gonna let those seams go to the outside. It's okay because with the spool block, we don't have any seams that we're lining up. And so for the spool block here, to finish the top and the bottom, I am simply folding over at my seam. And then if you want, this is the time that you can trim those. I don't usually with such small blocks. And then I want my spool to have the triangles heading like that. So I go ahead and put my block the way I want it, and then I can stitch it in place. All right, I'm stitching my spool top and bottom together using that 1/4-inch seam. So now I'm going to open it up, press it in place. Double checking underneath. So I'm double checking all my seams, making sure everybody's good. Pressing underneath as well. Should do that with every block. All right, and now I am going to square her up. We want her to be 4 inches. Going straight down the center, a little off down here. No worries, no one will ever know. I'm really just trimming threads, it looks like. And there she is. Mastering the Minis square, number 7.